Let's start with the prompt. Which choice describes data that weakens the hypothesis? So weakening is already a little bit tougher than supporting. So let's start reading. In the US, firms seek incentives to expand municipalities. A team hypothesized that municipalities are much more likely to respond to firms and offer incentives if expansions can be announced in time to benefit local elected officials than if they can't. The team contacted officials in municipalities inquiring about incentives for a firm looking to expand and indicating that the firm would announce this expansion on a date either just before or just after the election. So the hypothesis, well, first of all, let's get the background. Firms want incentives from municipalities in order to help them expand. But the hypothesis is that they're much more likely to respond. The municipalities will respond to the firms and offer the incentives if the expansions can be announced in time to benefit the local elected officials. So if it's going to help them in their election, then politicians are much more likely to respond. That's the hypothesis. Now let's look in the data and see whether it really supports that or weakens, because at the end of the day, we want to weaken this claim. Well, here we have the number of municipalities, we have the responses, and the announcement is going to be before the election or after the election. So the hypothesis is that before and after the election, we're going to have dramatically different numbers because politicians want to get elected. And looking at the chart, we're seeing that before and after the election, the numbers are kind of the same. They either didn't respond, they did respond, and whether they offered an incentive or not. But the numbers are slightly the same. There is an announcement before the election, and that announcement is always bigger. Like this bar is always slightly higher. So that kind of supports the argument, but it's only a teeny tiny bit higher. So to me, that kind of weakens things. We would want to see something a little more dramatic in appearance if we're going to be supporting a hypothesis. So let's start looking at the answers. A, large majority of the municipalities that received an inquiry mentioning plans for an announcement before the next election didn't respond. So many of them didn't respond. That doesn't really help us because we're looking for the difference between the municipalities that had an election that were going to respond before or after an election. So B, the proportion of municipalities that responded to the inquiry or offered incentives didn't substantially differ across the announcement timing conditions. That's our answer right there, because that's what we saw. We saw that the number of these two was pretty much the same in all instances, depending on whether it was going to be announced before or after the election. It wasn't very significant. So the answer here is B.